What prospects do you see for the Atlanta market? Is it different here? Is it the same here?
Yeah, I think a little perspective on kind of where we were and where we are and where we're heading. As an industry, this is kind of nationwide commercial real estate, all product types. Our nirvana was probably, to pick on a month, was March of 2007. Yeah, I think that's when we all felt well from a consumer confidence standpoint. Our 401k statements and mutual fund statements were all looking great. And as an industry in 2007, the industry did about $370 billion of transactions across all product types across the country. And to put that in perspective, 2009, I have a little chart that I actually keep on the refrigerator so the family can see it. 2009, that number was about $30 billion. And so after Lehman and Bear, the debacles of those companies happened at the end of 2008, we as an industry thought there was no light at all in the tunnel, and 2009 was a very choppy, difficult year. What we're seeing now, just on a national perspective, is, and I love listening to Leo. I wish I could hire him out to come to my Thanksgiving dinner, just wind him up and go. But he's right. I mean, it's amazing how the market has moved this year, and I would say most of which was in the last 4 months. We're not back to where we were in 06 or 07. We're definitely heading in the right direction, though. And we see the transaction market this year nationwide, and I'll kind of bring it down to Atlanta here in a second. We've done $50 billion year-to-date as an industry. We forecast that number will be about $75 billion by end of this year. A lot's going to close in the fourth quarter. And that kind of equates to a 2003 time frame, which wasn't a bad year at all. And we kind of anticipate next year maybe close to that 2004 time frame when it comes to capital transactions, about $130 or $140 billion. So we're moving in the right direction. The gentleman sitting next to me is a great example of both being an entrepreneur and also doing what he says he's going to do, and it's a great example. We marketed the Campanile building, which we rechristened 1155 Peachtree right before the marketing process, right at Peachtree and 14th, the old Bell South World headquarters. And it was probably the most anticipated office building offering in the entire, on the East Coast in the last 12 months. We went to the market, set personal records for me. We had 140 books out. We did 60 tours. We had 38 written offers. We had the most interest ever for an office building I've ever marketed, and I've worked on a few. And John, sitting next to me, was the anointed winner at the end, and he did a lot of things in order to get the building, but it just shows you it's a 25% leased building in Midtown. You would call it a very good core location, an opportunistic building from a rent roll standpoint. And we had every single type of capital source show up, from private capital, which John is, all the way to offshore capital, institutional, sovereign wealth funds, German, et cetera. Every single pension fund that you can think of showed up end of day. And that would not have happened 12 months ago. 12 months ago, we would have had 3 verbal offers and 7 written offers, and we would have sold the building for a value which was probably 25 to 35% below where we sold it. And even at the price that John bought it, I think he's going to be wildly successful, and we're going to look back on it in 5 years and say, wow, what a fantastic buy. So the market from a macro standpoint has definitely moved in the right direction. From a micro standpoint in Atlanta, and we'll get into this in a little bit, just the property markets, we've seen stabilization on the property side finally, and on the capital side, and I'll get into kind of where I think the market is from a capital allocation standpoint, we have stabilized. And so if you go to any presentation, you hear anybody say there's capital on the sidelines, that's somebody who's not in the transaction market and they haven't been in for a while. There is absolutely zero capital on the sidelines in the U.S. right now for commercial real estate. Zero.
Anyone else have any perspectives on that?
I wish
John?
there was zero on the sidelines. It wouldn't have been so damn hard to buy the building. But I agree with Mike. Everybody's trying to play. If they haven't, it's only because somebody else was lucky enough to win the asset, so they're taking the money and going somewhere else. But it's hotly contested, I think, across the board. Although I would still say, and you know, Jeff, you and I both have experienced the downturns and the opportunities that are there, and the difficulties. But I would say across the board it's hotly contested, but I would say the pricing is very advantageous for what I think 2013 and 14 will look like.
Yeah, I would say that this year we've seen a lot of activity. We build centers and we sell centers, and or we keep them, and we've seen a lot of activity in people wanting to buy our quality projects. I would say we're within 25 bips of pre-crisis cap rates for those good projects, and we probably sold about $400 million worth of assets in the last 24 months. Some right at the end of 2008 and some right now, and we feel a lot better. I thought it would never happen, quite frankly. We've been amazed this year at the compression in cap rates and the amount of capital out there, and not only for purchasing assets, but development. And of course, that's our favorite thing. And we are getting equity and loans to do new development, on a particular basis.
Joe, and just a comment, I guess, as representing the banking industry in the room, depending on where you are in the cycle, you're either loved or hated, and I think we're in the hate cycle for now. And our industry has suffered a significant body blow that I guess started in the middle of 2007 with burst of the bubble and the challenges that we faced. And I agree with Stephen's comments, is that the challenges that exist are outside of our industry, and also the solutions are outside of our industry. Ours is somewhat of a derivative of general economy in terms of demand for new space. We all know that. And the banks or the debt is a derivative of the equity. So everybody keeps asking sort of the question, what are the banks doing and what are they going to do next? Well, the answer is it kind of depends, because it depends on where the equity goes and where the opportunities are, and more importantly, where the general economy is headed. We're not going to know that until uncertainty until there's some level of less uncertainty, I guess is a different way of saying it, which we can talk about in a few minutes. But I am very bullish on Atlanta and Georgia, as you'll find out, as a native. So my comments are going to be a little bit biased, a little bit untempered. But I think we've got an incredible city, a vibrant city. I may change the color on Stephen's investments from red to something better over time. I think he's right that we're going to have some challenges as a city in the next few years, but we've seen those challenges before and we've faced them. And Atlanta and the citizens of Atlanta and Georgia are very resilient, as are all of you in the room in this industry. And you wouldn't be in this industry if you weren't. So I think the outlook, the long-term view outlook, is very, very positive. I think we still have challenges in the next couple of years that we will overcome.
What is our regions? And by region, I think we mean Alabama, Georgia, and East Tennessee. If you can put yourself in that perspective, what is our region's primary competitive advantage? Is it an educated workforce, transportation, its economic base, or natural resources?
Is that for the audience or for us?
Yeah.
Oh.
For the audience. Are you guys clicking away? Yeah. Yep. But I do want us to respond to what we get from the audience, and especially in light of, if this is a regional response, how does that differ from the Atlanta situation? So these would be the advantages that the region has. Does Atlanta have similar advantages to those? Are they different? Because I guess what I'm interested in, what we're going to get to eventually, is Atlanta's position, its relative position within the region. Do we have specific advantages that put us ahead of the rest of the region? So do we have results yet? Yep, okay.
I'll say this. I think our advantage certainly is the fact that we're not Alabama, we're not South Carolina, we're not Tennessee. It's our biggest advantage.
I think you can
Sorry,
say. I think you can say we're not Alabama
We develop in
twice.
those places, and it is difficult sometimes.
Hey Jeff, I think you can say we're not Alabama twice.
Yeah, we're not Alabama twice.
So it looks like transportation is the biggest advantage of the region. I think that that clearly that reflects probably the Atlanta advantages as well. Do you basically agree with
Is that how, I'm kind of shocked, actually, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I
Yep.
probably didn't read all that good writing you guys sent. Are we in the same competitive region in ULI as Alabama and Tennessee?
I think that's
Because
the
this is a
region-
wasted
ULI
conversation,
region,
because
Yes,
we're
John.
better than them in everything. Let's
this,
move on.
No, this.
I mean, we can talk about Nashville and Charlotte, maybe,
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
but Birmingham and Knoxville?
Well, John, just to
Well-
be clear, the ULI Atlanta district covers all of Georgia, Alabama, and Eastern Tennessee.
Right.
So that's the perspective.
Just
From
surround
our-
yourself with ugly friends, right?
Yeah.
So what you kind of done your whole life.
Yeah.
Except for
That's
today.
why, that's why I
Except
sat
for
down
today.
here next to you.
Touche.
Yeah. Well, Julian, it doesn't seem to be a surprise that Atlanta would transportation would be the primary driver. I mean, that's really what built this city originally, and it seems to be what's propelling it into the future.
I mean, the only thing we would like maybe to, those would be natural resources because of our water issue. And then you could make the argument that Tennessee, and you've probably done some centers and things in Birmingham, Tennessee, they have more terrain than we do, so it's a little more difficult from a development standpoint. We don't really have any terrain, which is part of our advantage and part of our reason why we boom and bust. Until you get in the mountains of North Georgia, there's no really terrain to keep us from developing.
You know, it wasn't on the list, Julian, but in my mind, I would say obviously the airport was a big driver for us the last 30, 40 years, and transportation, the network, et cetera, which may be our downfall the next 30, 40 years. I think we're going to get into that. Just overall quality of life, cost of living wasn't one of our choices, but I think when people graduate and they either come to school at Emory or Tech or Georgia State, they decide they want to stay here. And I think quality of life, cost of living, our access to the beach, our access to the mountains, just the sports that we have in the area, and overall cost of living compared to the Northeast and the West Coast. In my opinion, that would be kind of number one of what our advantage is.